Why, hello there, Allison.
Hey Jeff, how are you?
It's so nice to see you. I'm doing well, thank you. And we are actually going into episode 2 of this Heilkunst Life, and we're going to actually start in a with a continuity from what we kind of implied in episode 1, but now we're going to start fleshing it out even more. And what we implied, we'll talk a lot more about today, but essentially gets to the question of what is the objective definition of health. How does Heilkunst look at the definition of health? So, Alison, you actually, I think, prepared a really good case study to kick us off today. So I'll pass it over to you.
Yes, well, actually, I didn't prepare very much at all. It actually was the patient who prepared it. And she was super excited. She wrote to us and said, I'm improving my health with support from Arcanum. And she wrote in quotes, I am magic. I know I'm magic. And no one can stop my magical Heine. I changed the last word. And so she wrote that aerial. Now, this is something that some people do as a form of exercise up in the air with bands. So I know that I don't have the visual to accompany this, but you have to kind of imagine an aerial acrobat with like streams of like a yoga hammock. And she says, Ariel has been such a long and arduous journey for me, full of struggle, pain, literal, like aerial hurt, she says, and also triumph. I keep showing up because every time I do something, something comes from it. About 6 months ago, I took a step back in the level I was training in. I wasn't recovering. I was feeling frustrated. I wasn't gaining little victories. It was just a suffer fest. So I'm reviewing and repeating, in many cases, what I've already learned and done a ton. Holding myself back has merited actual growth and progress, literal gains, every class I take. I'm learning a new apparatus which seems to translate over in better strength and more awareness. I can do more tuck overs, pull ups, and I've got stamina to keep going. It's not just the stepping down into lower level classes that made a huge difference. It was taking my health more seriously, sleeping a lot more, opting out when I needed to, eating super clean, and working with Arcanum Holistic Clinic. I literally feel like I'm conquering my autoimmune issues, my Epstein Barr. My confidence is climbing, and I'm happier and less down on myself. I'm able to up my physical activity, and I'm more familiar with my body's cues to slow down and listen. This is by Holly S. in Colorado, in the United States.
Yeah. hmm Thank you. I'd only heard part of that. We were talking earlier. You read a part of that to me, but yeah, that's really awesome. It will expand out into our theme, based on some of the concepts we want to talk about today. But I really love that. Like, that's just human nature, right? People express things in their own vivid language, their own vocabulary words and all of this. So, and I really appreciate how she was describing her state of health and her improvements and all of that in that super concrete way.
Yeah.
hmm So, yeah, so as we kind of introduced a couple of minutes ago, we are really playing off a theme we did not really spell out in the first episode, but was kind of implicit, and it probably will reemerge in other future episodes as well, because it's such a big topic, and that is what I had outlined at the top was, what is the definition of health? How do we define what is a state of health when we're working with a patient and when we're trying to work towards a certain goal? Well, what is that goal? And actually, Alison, this is just popping into my mind. Years ago, you wrote a blog post on this, and it was called something like, "So what are we shooting for?" Text, right? Like, you need a goal, you need an objective, or else, how do you know when you get there, or how do you know what you're even trying to do? So, yeah, this idea of an objective definition of health is important because the reason we need to really deliberately define this is if we don't, what for ourselves, for anybody, what ends up happening is we default to the implicit definition of health in allopathic medicine, right? And their implicit definition is that health is basically an absence of symptoms, right? In other words, it's something that's not present. It's like, what's that old funny thing? It's like, I dare you not to imagine a pink elephant in the room right now, or something like that. And it's like, well, it's hard to imagine. Once you plant that seed, it's kind of there in your imagination. But conversely, it's hard to imagine an absence. Like if we're saying, well, health is an absence of symptoms. Well, what does that even supposed to mean? Well, we kind of know what it means. It's like, okay, well, somebody doesn't wake up with a big rash all over their body one morning, and they don't have a wart, they don't have this and that and the other thing. It's like, okay, well, as I say, that becomes the default implicit definition of health, but that's actually very far from the actual definition of health. So that's what I'm saying here is, if we don't make this explicit, then all of us, we're at risk of defaulting to that very unhelpful definition of health, on the basis of symptoms or the lack thereof. And actually, the other part of that implicit definition then becomes that everything about treatment becomes about getting rid of a symptom. So, then you get into phrases like, oh, well, I did this treatment, surgery or drug or remedy, whatever it is, but I still have my symptoms, meaning, the treatment didn't work. Work in that case, meaning, on our definition of symptoms and getting rid of them. So anyway, this is super, super important as to really become clear on this most critical question. And as we're going to see, we're going to get very far from this allopathic definition based on symptoms. So we'll explore a whole bunch of dimensions here today, but as I said, we will probably still have further dimensions in further episodes. It's one of those topics you can kind of spend a fair bit of time really, really unpacking it all. But yeah, we will do a really good focus today. But yeah, by the end of it, you should have a much clearer definition, hopefully, that we can all work together on.
Yeah. The one thing I'm thinking of just right off the bat is that when we're clearing iatrogenic diseases, especially for children, the parent will often ask us, what's the sign and signal that I know that things are working? And well, we usually say best case scenario is a fever. And, if you come from the allopathic matrix, that's considered, oh, well, if you have a fever, that has to be bad. That's an indication that there's a disease matrix on board. And so in our realm, as a healing reaction, a fever is a best case scenario because it's letting us know that we're actually teaching effectively the immune system how to conquer something in the child's midst in a very helpful way. And that's what you're looking for, is to activate that capacity. Because later on, if there are T cells, in a diagnosis of cancer on board, the immune system goes, no, it's okay, no problem. I'm already trained. I know what to do because you let me have this, romp with the chicken pox. So I'm good. So, just hang on a second. I'm going to cook it out.
And that's a really well chosen example, to use fever, Allison, because it gets right to our core concept here. You already said it in so many words. In allopathy, a fever is just another symptom. You measure it, you can put a number to it, and act according to what that's supposed to mean. But yeah, you're tapping into this deeper definition of health that we're getting at, where a fever is really something that moves the life forward, the life force forward, right? It's like we know in so many different ways that in the course of childhood development, all the various fevers and illnesses that a child gets are actually a very positive and necessary part of their development, where one fever after another, or one illness after another in a process of childhood development actually moves that child forward. You use the word learn, in the sense of educating the immune system, but the whole being of the child is learning, developing, moving forward. So to us, of course, a fever has a very different meaning, right? Along, and this is really bringing us into this broader definition of health we want to get into, which has to be based on the idea of development and movement, and it's not just children that grow and develop and move to the different stages of their life. Hopefully, at all stages of our life, we're in some kind of process of development and learning. And of course, there's the mind education, right? We read books and we learn things and things like that. But there's even what you alluded to, Alison, with the fever, that it becomes an education for the immune system. So our body, our mind, our immune system, our cell functions, everything is hopefully in a state of health, meaning that it's developing, learning, moving forward, growing, right, in a positive sense. So so thank you for bringing up the fever, because that really kicks us off with quite a bang.
Yeah, and I don't know if our listeners will actually pick out right away that you're using verbs to describe the individual's mechanism for health. Learning, developing, growth, motility, lability. And this is baked into our capacities as healthy human beings. And where there's been a disease matrix or suppression from iatrogenic insults, and that word iatrogenic just means pharma-induced disease. And for obvious reasons, I'm not going to be stating the actual drugs. But that iatrogenic insult and the allopathic approach is entirely static. Even the way that they do medicine is based on cadavers, and it's a dead science. You're not a cadaver. You are a motile, labile, developing, growing, learning, unfolding human being, and so are your children. And so the question automatically becomes, are you not interested then in having a system of medicine that also respects the true living principle of your essential self?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so verbs, learning, and all the rest of it. And as we said at the top as well, we're kind of forging a link from the first episode, and I'll make that a little more explicit now, on this idea of verbs and movement and everything, which is, in the first episode we were talking about the title is The Healing Power of Illness, but the real message of that episode was not just getting rid of symptoms in the way we're saying here, not having that allopathic definition, but really growing, learning, expanding your consciousness on the basis of not just getting rid of an illness, but actually going through it in a healthy living way, right? It's if taken properly, an illness can actually be a tremendous impulse to to further growth, development, and evolution. And ultimately, I like what you're saying, Alison, about we're using verbs, and the allopathic definition of health is using nouns, and not just any nouns. They're kind of using the dead static ones, right? The flat, boring ones. But yeah, this whole idea of movement, dynamic verbs, and all the rest of it really gets to the core of the human being and human health, is that we are not static nouns, like in the sense of like defining the human being at the material level. It's like, oh yeah, well, there's an organ placed over here, and there's these atoms and molecules with having this relationship over here, and the brain chemistry is doing this. That's all a dead static material description of the human being, but it doesn't really get us into this. What the true basis of the human being is this dynamic evolutionary process, where it's actually the state of consciousness that's at the center of what a human being is. And yes, we have matter, we have organs, we have all these parts, but those are just kind of like a costume we wear, to kind of display our state of mind or our consciousness to the world at large. So to kind of flip that usual paradigm is, to put consciousness at the base, and anything material is just kind of at effect of the consciousness. So anyways, just as I'm saying, picking up from episode 1, that's the really big lesson we got from there, which is, in today's definition of health that we're presenting, yes, we're talking about moving in all the verbs and really getting that consciousness to grow, develop, evolve, which is the center of the human being, and is actually where we want our definition to sit, not on the outer form of, the organs and the atoms and the molecules and all of that stuff.
Well said. As you're speaking, I'm thinking of another really juicy example. I'll be really quick. Oh, and she came in to see me because it was her third breast cancer diagnosis. And she had gone through, radiation and chemotherapy and all the rest of it. And it was back the third time. So she said, this is ridiculous. I'm going to try something totally different. And she was referred to me by an existing patient. So she went back to the doctor and she said, I want to actually use MRI and X-ray to see where I'm at with regards to my pathology as I go through this weird Heilkunst treatment thing where homeopathy is the base. And he just kind of, you can't actually, he said, you can't use my diagnostic tools unless you use all of my prescriptions and what I propose for you, including surgery, chemo, and radiation. And she said, I'll use the nicer term, screw you, you can kiss my hairy hiney. And basically went off to another city and got the diagnostic tools that she needed without all of his protocols, which had not clearly worked the first two times. And so the moment she said this to me, I was like, oh my gosh, she's going to be just fine. All I have to do is, on the law of cure like cures like, remove the blockages to cure. But with that kind of attitude, yeah, we've got motility, we've got lability, we've got growth, we've got development, we've got unfolding, we've got anger. And anger is actually interesting because it's the polarity of resignation, which is the definition of cancer.
And perhaps we'll do an episode on cancer at some point. But yeah, you're in today's theme. That's brilliant. That's part of the diagnosis of how someone's cancer treatment is going, is just what you said about the mental attitude, right? The typical disease expression of cancer is one of profound resignation. They've given up the ghost, as the expression says. They're kind of, what's that other expression? They're going through the motions in life, right? They're just kind of like, there's the outer surface of them seems to be showing up and doing things in life, but there's no true inner life left. So yeah, when somebody curses and uses colorful language and really has some grist to their life energy and how they're expressing and everything, generally something like that is a really good sign that their cancer treatment is actually going in the right direction. They're coming back to life, as it were. They're coming back to a real feisty engagement with their environment and the people around them.
Yeah, they're muy picante.
Yeah, yeah, very spicy indeed. Yeah. So the other thing you're reminding me too, as we go through the flow of this, these different examples and everything, is, again, this is still a little bit of a tie back to episode 1, but bringing it forward into what we're talking about today. It's like this whole business of the meaning of symptoms and raising our consciousness and really learning this new language, because symptoms are a language, right? They're not just strange anomalies of our physical body. But it becomes a funny thing for me, like just when I'm out in a social situation, friends, acquaintances, what have you, and as people tend to do here and there, someone starts to talk about their health, like they've been diagnosed with this or that, or they're having this and that issue or whatever, and on this basis, what I call symptom literacy, what we talked more about in the first episode, the idea that there's a deeper kind of psychological meaning to a whole range of symptoms someone can be talking about. I kind of can feel a little embarrassed for that person in public, because obviously they're symptom illiterate and they don't realize that they're really revealing some of the darkest parts of their inner world. Like in other words, most people look at the symptoms as just this outer random expression that they have to run off to the doctor for. It's like, oh yeah, I'll get a drug for that or whatever. It's like the equivalent of, oh yeah, I need a new carburetor for my car or whatever. Some boring mechanical problem is going on. But I feel embarrassed, as I said, because once you gain symptom literacy, you start to see that, oh, that person is revealing this deep, dark emotional secret about themselves in the form of a symptom, but they don't see it that way. They don't think of it that way. And they don't realize that deeper content, which we might not otherwise share in, among strangers or whatever. We might be more embarrassed to talk about it,
Yeah. This happened on the weekend. I was out hiking with a friend who actually is also a patient of mine, and she happens to be down in Mexico right now because her daughter's at an international school. And so I went on the weekend to visit her, and we were up hiking in the Sierras. And a friend of hers just spontaneously arrived on the scene. He said, "Oh, I'll walk with you." And he was a nuclear physicist. And the interesting thing was he was limping, and he said he's running in a marathon this weekend. I thought, wow, that looks painful and difficult and arduous. And he goes, "Oh, it's because I'm 55, and I'm very getting old, and because I'm getting old, I have these physical restrictions." And I said to him, "Do you have much pain?" And he said, "Yeah, quite a bit, but I just ignore it. I turn it off." And I said, "Is it mostly on your left side?" He said, "Oh yeah, it's mostly that I'm kind of locked up on my left side." And I asked him, I said, "What's your blood type?" And he said, "O." And I said, "Do you eat many grains?" And he said, "Well, I'm Mexican, so I eat, the usual tortillas and fajitas and all the rest of it." And he said, "Why do you ask?" And I let him know it's, because the left side is more the feminine side, and that if you're eating grains, especially as an O blood type, it's going to cause quite a bit of inflammation. And I said the left side is the feminine, and being more, as a nuclear physicist, area of logic and rationale, you might need to work more on the aspect of the feminine within you. And he's like, "I have no clue what you just said or why." I'm thinking, yeah, there you talk about the embarrassment again. It's just like there's nowhere to go, like with certain individuals. It's like, yeah, there you have it.
Well, and that's we're kind of drawing the continuity, into the episode today, but it started in episode 1. Yeah, this grand illiteracy of health and illness and symptoms, and it truly is an illiteracy where, as this fellow said to you, "I have no idea what you're talking about." Well, that's the problem with being illiterate, is you can't read the latest bestseller book or the newspaper headlines or anything else. It's like that whole world is lost to you. So yeah, so this world of meaning and truly healing from your illness is lost to the illiterate. So anyways, that's kind of a running theme there. But yeah, that's you hadn't told me that story, but yeah, that's interesting that happened to you this weekend.
Yeah, and he's going into health advising, so he's telling everybody they should jog. I'm thinking, here's this nuclear physicist dude, like in a lot of pain and all locked up. Like you can see his hamstring doesn't even stretch out on the left side, and his knee is stuck in a claw-like bent position. And I'm just thinking, wow, so everybody should jog. And I said, "Do you ever look at typologies? Like A blood types actually shouldn't be jogging. Walking is enough for them." And B's going up a hill on the side of a mountain, as we had just done, because my patient and I are both B blood types, and so we were out for the perfect. But he was like, "No, you are not going to get the proper reaction in the body if you are not jogging. Everybody needs to jog." And I just, of course, backed down and backed off.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, there you have it. You can take that advice, or we can explore different directions. But it's it's free choice for everybody, whatever they're ready for. Now, the really getting a little bit more into our the center of our definition. If we're talking about defining health, and we're trying to understand what is the Heilkunst understanding or the approach to health? What, like, it's a word, right? What is a word? What does a word mean? Well, to get a little more specific, um, we kind of draw a distinction between two key terms. You can say kind of fit under the grand umbrella of health, which is a little more of a generic term, but we differentiate between soundness and wellness.
Mhm.
Now, we know both of those words. The latter, wellness, is much more commonly used. I mean, just look around wherever you live. You're probably, within any number of walking city blocks or wherever you live, any number of wellness clinics. The so and so acupuncture wellness clinic and the so and so allergy wellness clinic, and everything's become a wellness clinic or wellness products. You go to the health food store and you get your wellness brand granola bar and wellness this, wellness that. So we kind of get oversaturated with this word wellness, but we almost never use the word soundness in English. Well, we use the word sound like in the sense of I heard a sound, but that's not what I'm talking about. I'm
Mhm.
talking about like when someone goes to their lawyer to draw up their will, in that classic phrase, being of sound mind and body, I'm going to set out this will today and it's valid because, I'm of sound mind and body, right? So that sense of sound or soundness is this other aspect of health. And there's nothing wrong with wellness, but it only gives us one component of health. So I just want to spend a moment because it's not a very commonly understood word or concept in the general health field. That concept of soundness, I already hinted at it with the drawing up the will, being of sound mind and body. There's this deeper sense of almost like an integrity, an integration of the mind, the body, all the part. Everything is working together towards a harmonious outcome. So earlier when we were talking about health, having a sense of movement and development, well, soundness is what gives us movement and development because only through soundness, only through integrity or integration, do we have the capacity for forward direction and forward movement. Wellness on its own doesn't can't take you anywhere. All it
Mhm.
says is that nothing is overtly out of balance, and that's okay. You don't want anything overtly out of balance, but as I say, without the soundness, you don't have the propulsion to move forward. Kind of one of our central topics today.
Mhm.
So, oh, and actually, even we of course we study Hahnemann and his Heilkunst. He was German, and we have all this German vocabulary that comes from him. This distinction is a little more clear in the German language. I'm not a German speaker. I'm not fluent. I just know a few basic vocabulary words. But the German word for health is gesund. That has the same etymological root as sound, gesund. Um, so,
Bless you, by the way.
oh yeah, that's right. When you say Gesundheit to someone after they sneeze, yeah, you're just basically blessing them with health, as it were. Right? We say bless you in English. They say soundness or health, right? Like, do you have this integrated hope? I hope for you to have this integrated sense of health, and you can move forward. That's long to say. So yeah, they just say Gesundheit. It's just a short form. But yeah, so gesund in German has this root of the word sound and this other concept that we're getting at. So the other thing in general, so I'm kind of giving you this distinction between wellness and soundness. They work together, you want both, but without the soundness, as I say, you're spinning your wheels. You're not actually going anywhere. You're not being led to where health is supposed to take you. And this leads to another major distinction within Heilkunst, which is as far as the whole, the function of the human living power is concerned, this was a grand part of Hahnemann's genius that he left to us, was he distinguished two sides of this living power of the human being. And this relates to the same distinction between the wellness and the soundness. He talked about the substantive or the sustaining power of the human being, and that we all need that, right? We need to digest our lunch, and we need to, keep everything, all the functions in the body balanced and running harmoniously, and all the rest of it. But the other side of the living power that he talked about was called the generative power. And that again brings us into our ideas of movement and propulsion and moving forward and kind of generating something new, create like out of creativity, we kind of naturally move from step to step to step, right? We have, let's say, that generative power, is a forward-moving power, and it's more what we're talking about when we're talking about the soundness, right? If someone being of sound health and sound mind and sound body. So sustaintive power, generative power kind of is this grand polarity that we work with as far as everything to do with how we apply Heilkunst medicine. But I'm just drawing on that concept in this specific part of defining health as far as the difference between wellness and soundness.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, so there, as I say, there's topics within topics there, but I just kind of wanted to get that basic polarity out there, because otherwise, as I say, if we don't have any definition, we're just going to end up defaulting back to the allopathic symptom definition. So yeah, we're definitely getting more and more nuance as we go here. And yeah, what is actually in that word? What is actually in our definition here?
Yeah. And with substantive health, you can do very well, with supplements, or, take a bit of honey if you have a sore throat, and some, ginger tea, and, and just kind of resolve a very superficial symptom picture. But you need to know that the generative power, if it's infected with what we call a pregnancy, then that is been an actual entering into the organism, something that's not going to respond to vitamin C and ginger tea. You have to actually act lawfully.
Mm-hmm. That's exactly it. And we sort of alluded to earlier today that you can get rid of a symptom, and there's a million ways to get rid of a symptom, anything from an antibiotic to a who knows what, what drug or whatever. But the fact that the symptom is, if the symptom was here, but now it's gone, that's not necessarily a good thing. Actually, that could be a bad thing, depending on how that happened, right? And so why I'm saying that in this form is, this brings us back to this core definition of health. And is there forward movement and all the things we're saying? Well, if, as I say, if a symptom is eliminated, through an antibiotic or something suppressive, then yes, there's movement, you can say, but it's kind of going backwards, right? Mm-hmm. It's kind of going in the opposite direction of health. So as I said, the person and the doctor may be happy in that moment because, oh, look, the symptom is gone. But the fact that they had to make that patient's health go backwards to do it is, now we're kind of in a negative definition of health. Mm-hmm. They're going backwards, they're going the wrong way. I don't care that the symptom is gone because it was gotten rid of by actually making the health worse. So right. Here's one of the consequences of not having a clear definition of health is you end up with bad consequences.
Right. Like my patient with the repeating breast cancer.
That's it. Yeah, the so-called repeating breast cancer, there's nothing repeating there. It was never gotten rid of in the right way in the first place. So it was always there. It's just poking its head up over and over again. Peekaboo, hello, it's me again. You never left. That's the dear friend. You never went anywhere. So this idea of movement is what we talk about when we're using the correct law of cure, like cures like, or the law of similars, that has movement in the correct direction. As we always say, that classic phrase, better out than in. In other words, if a disease process is inside of somebody and we give them the correctly prescribed homeopathic remedy, and now that moves outward, it may move out onto the skin, it may move out into a temporary cough or some other symptom, that's actually a good thing. In the allopathic definition, it looks like we've created a bad situation. It's like, well, they didn't have that symptom before, and now you gave them a remedy, and now they have a symptom. So in that definition of health, we supposedly have made the health worse, right? We added a symptom, but we didn't add a symptom in that sense. We just moved the disease from a deeper layer out to the more superficial layer, the better out.
The more noble organs to the least noble organs.
Exactly. The nobility of organs, because they're all going to hold court any moment. But that actually demonstrates our core idea here is the proper direction of healing and curing. It moves outward. as I say, out onto the skin or what have you. So at the physical symptom level, we get this proper movement, things moving outward. But it's like we were saying earlier, in somebody's life in general, as a result of their proper treatment, their life is going to start moving forward. Where they were, whatever, stuck in a
Mhm.
dead job, whatever the example is, that's an example of being, not moving in the right direction or not moving forward. But yeah, through proper cure of not just the physical symptoms and diseases, the whole life force of that person really starts to get that proper healthy forward direction. So that's, say all these pieces go together. It's not like you have physical health over here and you have mental health over here and emotional health. No, it's the whole human being is moving forward. We're just seeing it come out in these different channels, one or the other, or at the same time, as it were. But anyway, that whole idea of forward moving direction is really becomes our baseline of what we're looking for as far as the proper healing process that's going on.
Yeah, well said.
Mhm. Now, is this a good time, Allison? I know you had some other examples that you had brought out. I don't know if you just can be cued like that, like a like a the
Like
Friday.
a little, yeah, a little cute robot. Mhm.
Mhm.
There was one here I really love. She's off thyroid prescriptions. I never thought it would be possible, but here I am today, free of all thyroid prescriptions. I started seeing Allison nearly 2 years ago, and I must admit, believing I could be off all prescriptions was hard to swallow. After all, when my physician told me 20 years ago that I needed to take Synthroid, he said it would be for the rest of my life, and I believed him. To kickstart my thyroid journey, Ali suggested I follow a thyroid diet. I decided at the least I wanted to be healthier and happier, so what the heck? I eliminated all caffeine from my diet, started exercising, and cut way back on the sugar intake. A little over a year ago, I was able to cut my thyroid medication dosage in half. And then this year, I was able to eliminate it entirely. I take a kelp and iodine supplement daily for support, but that's it. I feel great and much more energetic. Thank you, Allie. That was Linda F. in Nebraska, United States.
Yeah, very good. Yeah, and again, like I said earlier, yeah, there's like I just love hearing the vivid, real language of an individual person because yeah, it is so, concrete and particular, and yeah, say we have all the concepts; those are tend to be broad and general, but yeah, I love those particular examples. It really drives it home. Mm. I actually, speaking of examples, I have one, and
Yeah.
as a matter of fact, it's an example of myself. And
Oh,
it's again, once again, it's conceptually, it's going to harken back to episode 1, where we talked not just about physical symptoms, but also the meaning of accidents. Right, if somebody gets into a fender bender or things like that. We kind of analyze it on the exact same grounds of what's kind of moving in their life energy or stuck or what have you. So the example of myself is this was a number of years ago, back at the beginning of the clinic, and it was at a point early on where I was just starting to do some hiring, to help with some of the administration and the management of those kinds of things at the clinic. You just can't do it all yourself after a certain point, and I did have resistance. Right, it's the classic business owners condition of for one, they're kind of they're running as fast as they can and doing everything, but they kind of can get into this sense of, well, I don't have time to stop and hire someone and train somebody and show them how to do it. It'll just be much quicker if I do it. I know how to do it, and I can just get in there and do it in 3 seconds. And so yeah, that whole idea of hiring kind of becomes a bottleneck or a resistance. That's a classic sign that at the early stages of a business. And this was me. I definitely was resistant to that. And anyway, so the where the story begins and really gives us an example here is while I was in that phase, including my resistance, I was driving somewhere in my car one day, and out of the blue, the power steering just gave right out. Right, and anyone now the car still worked and everything, but I really had to muscle my way to make the turns. And not being someone born in the 1920s or whatever, I never knew a world of cars without power steering and power brakes and power. Like I just
Were the
never.
kids in the car?
No, it was just no, that was just me on my own. But but yeah, as I say, I never even knew what that other world was like without all the power add-ons. And so yeah, I had to kind of power my way home, literally, like using every muscle um, power I had to get that wheel to turn and everything. But yeah,
Wow.
that was
It's,
in the yeah, exactly, in the theme of the Thorwald Deflison book we talked about in episode one. Yeah, that was this beautiful example of my life force um, exemplifying itself through this occurrence, right? Because
Mhm.
that's what, through my resistance of doing, beginning to hire, that's effectively what I was doing. I was saying, well, I'm just going to power my way through everything, and I don't have time to stop and to do all the hiring and the training and all that. So yes, sure enough, my car dutifully responded to my life energy and said, oh, okay, that's what you want. Okay, oh, I can do that. Let's do a little bit of that today. So yeah.
Wow. Yeah. Well, I'm glad you're okay.
Yeah, here. Look, hello.
Yeah, because that freaks me out a little bit. Because yeah, that's because it affects your capacity for timely maneuvering. If you lose your power steering, like all the other cars on the road are not Model T Fords or you know
Right.
1931 Chevs. Like yeah, you need that capacity for quick reaction. So that's frightening.
Yeah. No,
Mhm.
yeah, it wasn't on the highway or anything like that. So it was a safe situation, fortunately, of course.
Yeah,
But yeah, it
fortunately.
was very, very you can't really hide
No.
when life throws a symbol at you like that.
Yeah, understood.
Hmm. Yeah. So back to symptom literacy. Yeah, if I were perfectly illiterate at that point, I would have just grumbled and taken the car in to the mechanic and done all that stuff. But without gaining the insight of, well, yeah, what's really going on in my life force
Mhm.
that would have needed to express in that moment.
Yeah, it's a great example.
Mhm. Mhm. So now I think we've kind of laid out a lot of the really basic framework that everything we wanted to talk about. And whether, Alison, you have another good example at this point, or I have another, I think one or so more little kind of sub areas, we can do one or the other or both. But yeah, I think otherwise, yeah, we're getting to a point of a really good definition of what we're talking about here.
Yeah, I do have another one. I'm thinking though of something that came up a week or so ago. I was treating a patient somewhere in the States, and the mom at the end of the session just said, "Oh my God, I'm losing my mind. The baby's not sleeping at all. They're up at least 14 times a night." And I really reassured her that by treating her state of mind, that and the feeling that she has had enough. So we gave her the homeopathic remedy sepia, and she wrote a testimonial saying the next day, "Oh my God, it's like a miracle. Like the baby hadn't slept in months." But sepia is the homeopathic remedy for the careworn mom, who's just like, she just wants to get into her SUV and drive south and spend a week at the beach, and then come back after the kids are grown. And so by giving her the remedy sepia, of course the baby finally kind of calmed down, because who was losing her biscuit 20 times a day but keeping it under wraps the best that she could. So baby was just attempting to express that during the course of the night, through like this hypervigilance and constant nursing and constant neediness and not being able to be put down for a moment. And so it's just, again, that's a really good example of diagnosing the true cause, and being able to define the roots, and resolving it in one person that actually affects
Hmm.
another.
Hmm. Exactly. Exactly. Okay, so I think, oh, and one, just a general point I wanted to make, I will add them into the show notes for this episode, but there are probably way more than I can count, a great number of books of people talking about different life experiences they've had as they've gone through different illnesses, and the lessons they've learned and how they kind of ended up moving forward in their life, after coming out of that illness, as opposed to, again, back to that allopathic definition. It's like, okay, I was going along in my life, I had a health problem, I got rid of it, and then I went back to my life again. Well, that's a very static definition, right? It's like, again, you can use that to fix the carburetor on your car or whatever, but is it fixed or is it broken? But yeah, all these books, and I know it's a book, it's a fairly actually popular book. You've read it. I haven't read it yet. It's maybe about 10 years old, Alison. It's called, what's it called again? It's by Anita Morgiani, and she talks about,
Oh,
she
yeah.
had cancer, and she basically describes more along the lines of we're talking about, how that really opened up her life, and she moved forward beyond, beyond going through the whole cancer process and everything, rather than just, oh yeah, I was okay, then there was a problem, I fixed it, and then I was back to okay again. So yeah, I'll put that book, I'll put any number of books.
Yeah, Dying to Be Me.
Oh yeah, that's it. Dying to Be Me. That's a great title.
Uh-huh.
Mhm. Yeah, so yeah, it really speaks to our theme today of, yeah, illness isn't just this annoyance or inconvenience, but it's something that pushes you further into, yeah, who are you? How do you be yourself? How do you, really express what you're supposed to
Yeah,
be?
she was on her deathbed, like she was
Yeah.
on her way out, and then cycled around realizing that she had never fully actualized her life on her terms, that she was operating more out of obligation and expectation. And so, yeah, what a, like you say, a great, great title, and super recovery to fully connect and embody her life on her own terms. And of course, she's become an international speaker and best-selling author, and she has solved that whole contract and karma, and yeah, she's done it all, and she's, yeah, what an amazing life story.
Mhm, mhm. Okay, well, Alison, I'll thank you so much. This is about 100 times more fun to have a conversation with you than just read off my notes on my own or something. And we will kind of tie a little bow on the episode at this point. But as always, we will continue to have discussion about all this content, and you can actually join in with us. You can become an active part of the conversation. Join us at our website, www.thisheilkunstlife.com, and just go to where it talks about joining our inner circle. And that's where these episodes and the conversations just kind of live on, beyond the confines of the recording time that we set out today.
Yes. In closing, Jeff, I just wanted to, if you'll permit me, to read aphorism 9.
Oh, yes, yes.
And I've just pulled it up. We had, back in 2012, you had actually written a great blog article, What is the Purpose of Health? And so, since today's episode is about the definition of health, I thought I would grace Dr. Samuel Hahnemann just with a moment of his definition, which I think is one of the most powerful things I've ever studied or read. And always, trying to keep it in the back of my mind as we serve patients, because it's not like any definition of health I've ever heard of before in the past.
Mm-hmm.
So aphorism 9, it comes from the Organon der Heilkunst in German, or the Organon of healing and curing. And in there, aphorism 9, he writes, in the healthy human state, the spirit-like living power, also known as autocracy, enlivening the material body or organism as dynamis, holds sway unrestrictedly and keeps all of its parts in admirable, harmonious, and vital operation in both feelings and functions. so that our indwelling rational spirit can freely avail itself of this living, healthy instrument for the higher purposes of our existence.
Mhm. Okay,
Yeah,
that
I'll
is
get the door. You close up, honey.
And well, as I said, we will see you with our ongoing discussion in our inner circle, this heilkunstlife.com. And I thank you all again. This is great fun, and we will see you in the next episode.